Good evening. I'm Darrell Burkell, president of McNeese State University. Tonight, McNeese Radio KBYS presents a Halloween treat for the whole family. We've partnered with two of the most innovative cultural groups in the area, the Lake Charles Little Theater, the longest-serving arts organization in Southwest Louisiana, and Banners of McNeese State University, which brings a vibrant world of culture to local audiences every season. Two hurricanes have taken away their performance spaces, for now, but for the Little Theater and Banners, the show must go on. And they've united here at KBYS to bring it to radio and a worldwide live stream. Tonight, local performers and celebrities have gathered to present a live recreation of The War of the Worlds. They've updated the story while still capturing the thrill of the famous 1938 broadcast by Orson Welles. The director is Brooke Hanneman of Banners. Our sound engineer and effects director is Dennis Schilling. Sound designer is Jody Taylor. The underwriter is Lake Charles Little Theater. And the most important element is you. So gather your family around the radio now as we present The War of the Worlds.
McNeese Radio, the Lake Charles Little Theater, and Banners at McNeese State University present the Orson Welles and Mercury Theater on the Air in The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Ladies and gentlemen, the director of the Mercury Theater and star of these broadcasts, Orson Welles.
We now know that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's, and yet as mortal as his own. We now know that as human beings busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied, perhaps almost as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complacence, people went to and fro around the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over the small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space. Yet across an immense ethereal gulf, minds that are to our minds as our minds are to the beast in the jungle, intellects vast, cool, and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes and slowly and surely drew their plans against us. In the 20th year of the 21st century came the Great Disillusionment. It was near the end of October. Business was better. The hurricane scare was almost over. Most people were back at work. Sales were picking up. On this particular evening, October 30th, the Crossley service estimated that 32 million people were listening in on radios.
This is Ben Terry with KPLC. For the next 24 hours, not much change in temperature. A slight atmospheric disturbance of undetermined origin is reported over Shreveport, causing a low-pressure area to move down rather rapidly over the southern portion of Louisiana, bringing a forecast of rain, accompanied by winds of light gale force. Maximum temperature of 78, minimum of 55. This weather report comes to you from the National Weather Service.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. From the Majestic Hotel in Lake Charles, we bring you the music of the Hackberry Ramblers.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of French music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving towards the Earth with enormous velocity. Professor Pearson of the observatory at McNeese State University confirms Farrell's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote. Now a tune that never loses its favor, the ever-popular Jolie Fille, the Hackberry Ramblers. Ladies and gentlemen, following on the news given in our bulletin a moment ago, the Government Meteorological Bureau has requested the large observatories of the country to keep an astronomical watch on any further disturbances occurring on the planet Mars. Due to the unusual nature of this occurrence, we've arranged an interview with the noted astronomer Professor Partin, who will give us his views on this event. In a few moments, we will take you to the McNeese State University Observatory in South Lake Charles, Louisiana. We return you until then to the music of the Hackberry Ramblers. We're now ready to take you to the McNeese Observatory, South Lake Charles, where Carl Phillips, our commentator, will interview Professor Richard Partin, famous astronomer. We take you now to McNeese State University, Lake Charles.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Carl Phillips speaking to you from the McNeese Observatory. Now, I'm standing in a large semicircular room, pitch black, except for an oblong split in the ceiling, and through that opening, I can just see a sprinkling of stars that are casting a kind of frosty glow over the intricate mechanism of this huge telescope. Now, the ticking sound you hear, that's the vibration of the clockwork. Professor Partin stands directly above me on a small platform, peering through the giant lens. Now, I ask you to be patient, ladies and gentlemen, during any delay that may arise during our interview. Besides the ceaseless watch of the heavens, Dr. Partin may be interrupted by telephone or other communications, and during this period, he's in constant touch with the astronomical centers around the world. Professor, may I begin our questions?
At any time, Mr. Phillips.
Professor, would you please tell our radio audience exactly what you see as you observe the planet Mars through your telescope?
Nothing unusual at the moment, Mr. Phillips. A red disk swimming in a blue sea, transverse stripes across the disk. Quite distinct now because Mars happens to be at the point nearest the Earth, in opposition, as we call it.
Right, and in your opinion, what do these transverse stripes signify, Professor Partin?
Well, not canals, I can assure you, Mr. Phillips, although that's the popular conjecture of those who imagine Mars to be inhabited. From a scientific viewpoint, the stripes are merely the result of atmospheric conditions peculiar to the planet.
So you're quite convinced that, as a scientist, that living intelligence as we know it does not exist on Mars?
I should say the chances against it are 1,000 to 1.
And yet, how do you account for these gas eruptions occurring on the surface of the planet at regular intervals?
Mr. Phillips, I cannot account for it.
Well, by the way, Professor, just for the benefit of our listeners, how far is Mars from the Earth?
Approximately 40 million miles.
Well, that seems a safe enough distance. Just a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Someone has just handed Professor Partin a message. While he reads it, let me remind you that we're speaking to you from the McNeese State University Observatory in Lake Charles, Louisiana, where we're interviewing the world-famous astronomer, Professor Partin. One moment, please. Professor Partin has passed me a message which he just received. Professor, may I read the message to the listening audience?
Certainly, Mr. Phillips.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to read to you a wire addressed to Professor Partin from Dr. Gray of the Natural History Museum in New York. 9:15 Eastern Standard Time. Seismograph registered shock of almost earthquake intensity occurring within a radius of 20 miles of McNeese University. Please investigate. Signed, Lloyd Gray, Chief of Astronomical Division. Professor Partin, could this occurrence possibly have something to do with the disturbances observed on the planet Mars?
Oh, hardly, Mr. Phillips. This is probably a meteorite of unusual size, and its arrival at this particular time is merely a coincidence. However, we shall conduct a search as soon as daylight permits.
All right, thank you, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 10 minutes, we've been speaking to you from the observatory at McNeese, bringing you a special interview with Professor Partin, noted astronomer. This is Carl Phillips speaking. We now return you to our KBYS studio.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is the latest bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News, Toronto, Canada. Professor Morse of the Macmillan University reports observing a total of 3 explosions on the planet Mars between the hours of 7:45 p.m. and 9:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This confirms earlier reports received from American observatories. Now, nearer home comes a special announcement from Ragley, Louisiana. It is reported that at 8:50 p.m., a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on a farm on the outskirts of Ragley, 22 miles from Lake Charles. The flash in the sky was visible within a radius of several hundred miles, and the noise of the impact was heard as far north as Longville. We have dispatched a special mobile unit to the scene and will have our commentator, Mr. Phillips, give you a word description as soon as he can reach there from McNeese. In the meantime, we take you to the Hotel Charleston, where the Mellotones are offering a program of dance music. We take you now to Ragley, Louisiana.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Carl Phillips again in the Wilmoth Farm, Ragley, Louisiana. Professor Pearson and myself made the 11 miles from the McNeese Observatory in, about 10 minutes. Well, I hardly really know where to begin to paint a word picture for you of the strange scene I'm seeing. It's like something out of a modern Arabian Nights. I just got here and I haven't had a chance to look around. I guess that's it. Yeah, I guess that's the thing directly in front of me. It's half buried in a vast pit. Must have struck with terrific force. The ground's covered with splinters of a tree. It must have struck on its way down. And what I can see of the object itself, it doesn't look very much like a meteor, at least not the meteors I've seen. It's more like a huge cylinder. It has a diameter of, well, what would you say, Professor Pearson?
About 30 yards.
Yeah, about 30 yards. The metal on the sheath is, well, I've never seen anything like it. The color is a sort of yellowish white. Curious spectators are pressing close to the object in spite of the efforts of the police to keep them back. They're getting in front of my line of vision. Excuse me, would you mind standing to one side, please?
One side there. One side.
Now, while the police are pushing the crowd back, here's Mr. Wilmoth, owner of the farm here. Now, he may have some interesting facts to add. Mr. Wilmoth, would you please tell the radio audience as much as you remember of this rather unusual visitor that dropped in your backyard? And step a little closer. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Wilmoth.
I was listening to the radio.
I'm sorry. Closer and louder, please.
Pardon me?
Louder, please, and closer to the microphone.
Yes, sir. Well, I was listening to the radio and kind of drowsing. That professor fellow was talking about Mars, so I was half dozing and
Yeah, Mr. Wilmoth, but then what happened?
As I was saying, I was listening to the radio, kind of halfway.
Yeah, and then you saw something.
Not first off. I heard something.
And what did you hear?
A hissing sound, like this. Kind of like a 4th of July rocket.
Then what?
Turned my head out the window and would have swore I was to sleep and dreaming.
Yeah?
I seen a kind of greenish streak, and then zingo! Something smacked to the ground. Knocked me clear out of my chair.
Well, were you frightened, Mr. Wilmoth?
Well, I ain't quite sure. I reckon I was kind of riled.
Well, thank you, Mr. Wilmoth. Thank you very much.
Want me to tell you more?
No, that's quite all right. That's plenty. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard Mr. Wilmoth, owner of the farm where this thing has fallen. Wish I could convey the atmosphere, the background of this fantastic scene. Hundreds of cars are parked in a field in back of us, and police are trying to rope off the roadway leading to the farm, but it's really no use. Their crowds are breaking right through, and their headlights throw an enormous spot on the pit where the object's half buried. Some of the more daring souls are venturing near the edge, their silhouettes standing out against the metal sheen. One man wants to touch the thing. He's having an argument with the policeman, and, of course, the policeman wins. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's something I haven't mentioned in all this excitement, but it's become more distinct. Perhaps you've caught it already on your radio. Just listen. You hear that? It's a curious humming sound that seems to come from inside the object. Here, let me move the microphone a little bit closer. Now, we're no more than about 25 feet away. Can you hear it now, Professor Pearson?
Yes, Mr. Phillips.
Can you tell us the meaning of that scraping noise inside the thing?
Possibly the unequal cooling of its surface.
Well, do you still think it's a meteor, Professor?
I don't know what to think. The metal casing is definitely extraterrestrial, not found on this Earth. Friction from the Earth's atmosphere usually tears holes in a meteorite. This thing is smooth and, as you can see, of cylindrical shape.
Just a minute. Something's happening, ladies and gentlemen. This is terrific. The end of this thing is beginning to flake off, and the top is beginning to rotate like a screw. The thing must be hollow.
She's moving.
Keep back there! Keep back, I tell you!
Keep trying to
It's red hot.
Keep back there!
Cinder.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most terrifying thing I've ever witnessed. Wait a minute. Someone's crawling out of the hollow top. Someone or something I can see peering out of that black hole. Two luminous discs that look like eyes. It might be a face. It might be. Good heavens, something wriggling out of the shadow like a gray snake. Now it's another one and another. They look like tentacles. There, I can see the thing's body. It's as large as a bear and glistens like wet leather, but that face, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. The eyes are black and gleam like a serpent. The mouth is V-shaped with saliva dripping from its rimless lips that seem to quiver and pulsate. The monster, whatever it is, could hardly move. It seems weighted down, possibly by gravity. The thing's raising up. The crowd falls back. They've certainly seen enough. This is the most extraordinary experience. I can't find words. I'm pulling the mic with me as I talk. I'll have to stop the description until I've taken a new position. Hold on, I'll be back in just a minute.
We are bringing you an eyewitness account of what's happening on the Wilmoth Farm, Ragley, Louisiana. We now return you to Carl Phillips in Ragley.
Here I am. I'm in back of a stone wall that adjoins Mr. Wilmoth's garden. From here I can get a sweep of the whole scene. I'll give you every detail as long as I can talk for as long as I can see. More state police have arrived, and they're drawing up a cordon in front of the pit, about 30 of them. And there's no need to push the crowd back now. They're willing to keep their distance. The captain is conferring with someone. We can't see quite who that would be. Oh, yes, I believe it's Professor Pearson. Yes, it is. Now they've parted, and the professor moves around to one side studying the object while the captain and two policemen advance with something in their hands. Oh, I can see it now. It appears to be a white handkerchief tied to a pole. It's a flag of truce, if those creatures know what that means, what anything means. Wait. Something's happening. A hump shape is rising from the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. There's a jet flame springing from the mirror, and it leaps right at the advancing men and striking them head on. Good Lord, they're turning into flame. The whole field's on fire. The woods, the barns, the gas tanks of the automobiles. It's spreading everywhere. It's coming this way about 20 yards to my right.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we're unable to continue the broadcast from Ragley, Louisiana. Evidently, there's some difficulty with our field transmission. However, we will return to that point at the earliest opportunity. In the meantime, we have a late bulletin from San Diego, California. Professor Endelkoffer, speaking at a dinner of the California Astronomical Society, expressed the opinion that the explosions on Mars are undoubtedly nothing more than severe volcanic disturbances on the surface of the planet. Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been handed a message that came in from Ragley by telephone. Just a moment. At least 40 people, including 6 state troopers, lie dead in a field east of Ragley, their bodies burned and distorted beyond all possible recognition. The next voice you hear will be that of Brigadier General Montgomery Smith, commander of Fort Polk in Vernon Parish, Louisiana.
I have been requested by the governor of Louisiana to place the parishes of Beauregard, Allen, and Calcasieu as far south as McNeese State University under martial law. No one will be permitted to enter this area except by special pass issued by state or military authorities. 4 companies of state militia are proceeding from Fort Polk to Ragley and will aid in the evacuation of homes within the range of military operations. Thank you.
Just been listening to General Montgomery Smith commanding the state militia at Fort Polk. In the meantime, further details of the catastrophe in Ragley are coming in. The strange creatures, after unleashing their deadly assault, crawled back in their pit and made no attempt to prevent the efforts of firemen to recover the bodies or extinguish the fire. Combined fire departments of Beauregard and Allen Parish are fighting the flames which menace the entire countryside. We have been unable to establish any contact with our mobile unit in Ragley, but we hope to be able to return you there at the earliest possible moment. In the meantime, we take you... just a moment, please. Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been informed that we have finally established communication with an eyewitness of the tragedy. Professor Pearson has been located at a farmhouse near Ragley, where he has established an emergency observation post. As a scientist, he will give you his explanation of the calamity. The next voice you hear will be that of Professor Pearson, brought to you by Direct Wire. Professor Pearson.
Of the creatures in the rocket cylinder at Ragley, I can give you no authoritative information, either as to their nature or their origin or their purposes here on Earth. Of their destructive instrument, I might venture some conjectural explanation. For want of a better term, I shall refer to the mysterious weapon as a heat ray. It's all too evident that these creatures have scientific knowledge far in advance of our own. It is my guess that in some way they are able to generate an intense heat in a chamber of practically absolute non-conductivity. This intense heat that they project in a parallel beam against any object they choose by means of a polished parabolic mirror of unknown composition, much as the mirror of a lighthouse projects a beam of light. That is my conjecture of the origin of the heat ray.
Thank you, Professor Pearson. Ladies and gentlemen, here is a bulletin from Fort Polk. It is a brief statement informing us that the charred body of Coral Phillips has been identified in a Fort Polk hospital. Now here's another bulletin from Washington, D.C. Office of the Director of National Red Cross reports 10 units of Red Cross emergency workers have been assigned to the headquarters of the state militia stationed outside of Ragley, Louisiana. Here's a bulletin from the McNeese Police Department. The fires at Ragley and vicinity now under control. Scouts report all quiet in the pit and no sign of life appearing from the mouth of the cylinder. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special statement from Mr. Harry McDonald, Vice President in charge of operations.
We have received a request from the militia at Fort Polk to place at their disposal our entire broadcasting facilities. In view of the gravity of the situation and believing that radio has a responsibility to serve in the public interest at all times, we are turning over our facilities to the state militia at Fort Polk.
We take you now to the field headquarters of the state militia in Ragley.
This is Captain Lansing of the Signal Corps attached to the state militia, engaged in military operations in Ragley. A situation arising from the reported presence of certain individuals of unidentified nature is now under complete control. The cylindrical object, which lies in a pit directly below our position, is surrounded on all sides by 8 battalions of infantry, without heavy field pieces, but adequately armed with rifles and machine guns. All cause for alarm, if such cause was ever existed, is now entirely unjustified. The things, whatever they are, do not even venture to poke their heads above the pit. I can see their hiding places plainly in the glare of the searchlights here. With all their reported resources, these creatures can scarcely stand up against heavy machine gun fire. Anyway, it's an interesting outing for the troops. I can make out their khaki uniforms crossing back and forth in front of the lights. Looks almost like a real war. There appears to be some slight smoke in the woods bordering Boggy Creek, possibly fire started by campers. Well, we ought to see some action soon. One of the companies is deployed on the left flank. Yeah, watch C. Okay, quick thrust and it will all be over. Now, wait a minute. I can see something on the top of the cylinder. No, it's nothing but a shadow. Now, the troops are on the edge of the Wilmoth farm. 7,000 armed men closing in on an old metal tub. Wait, that wasn't a shadow. It's something moving, solid metal. Kind of a shield affair rising up out of the cylinder. It's going higher and higher. It's standing on legs, actually rearing up on a sort of metal framework. Now it's reaching above the trees and the searchlights are on it. Hold on!
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Beauregard Parish farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars. The battle which took place tonight at Ragley has ended in one of the most startling defeats ever suffered by an army in modern times. 7,000 men armed with rifles and machine guns pitted against a single fighting machine of the invaders from Mars. Only 120 known survivors. The rest strewn over the battle area from Ragley to Moss Bluff, crushed and trampled to death under the metal feet of the monster or burned to cinders by its heat ray. The monster is now in control of the middle section of Louisiana and has effectively cut the state through its center. Communication lines are down from Shreveport to the Gulf Coast, railroad tracks are torn, and service from New Orleans to Houston discontinued. Highways to the north, south, and west are clogged with frantic human traffic. Police and Army reserves are unable to control the mad flight. By morning, the fugitives will have swelled Houston, Lafayette, and Baton Rouge, it is estimated, to twice their normal population. Martial law prevails throughout southwest Louisiana and adjoining areas. At this time, we take you now to Washington for a special broadcast on this national emergency. The Secretary of the Interior.
Citizens of the nation, I shall not try to conceal the gravity of the situation that confronts the country, nor the concern of your government in protecting the lives and property of its people. However, I wish to impress upon you, private citizens and public officials, all of you, the urgent need of calm and resourceful action. Fortunately, this formidable enemy is still confined to a comparatively small area, and we may place our faith in the military forces to keep them there. In the meantime, placing our faith in God, we must continue the performance of our duties, each and every one of us, so that we may confront this destructive adversary with a nation united, courageous, and consecrated to the preservation of human supremacy on this earth. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have just heard the Secretary of the Interior speaking from Washington. Bulletins too numerous to read are piling up in the studio here. We are informed that the central portion of New Jersey is blacked out from radio communication due to the effect of the heat ray upon power lines and electrical equipment. Here is a special bulletin from New York. Cables received from English, French, German scientific bodies offering assistance. Astronomers report continued gas outbursts at regular intervals on planet Mars. Majority voice opinion that enemy will be reinforced by additional rocket machines. Attempts made to locate Professor Pearson, who has observed Martians at close range. It is feared that he was lost in recent battle.
Here is another bulletin here in the newsroom. Langham Field, Virginia. Scouting planes report 3 Martian machines visible above treetops, moving north towards Somerville, with population fleeing ahead of them. Heat ray not in use, although advancing at express train speed. Invaders pick their way carefully. They seem to make conscious effort to avoid destruction of cities and countryside, but they stop to uproot power lines, bridges, railroad tracks. Their apparent objective is to crush resistance, paralyze communication, and disorganize human society. Here is another bulletin from Basking Ridge, New Jersey. Hunters have stumbled on a second cylinder, similar to the first one embedded in the Great Swamp 20 miles south of Morristown. U.S. Army field pieces are proceeding from Newark to blow up the second invading unit before the cylinder can be opened and the fighting machine rigged. They're taking up position in the foothills of Watchung Mountains. Here is another bulletin from Langham Field, Virginia. Scouting planes report enemy machines, now 3 in number, increasing speed northward, kicking over houses and trees in an evident haste to form conjunction with their allies south of Morristown. Machines also sighted by a telephone operator east of Middlesex, within 10 miles of Plainfield. Another bulletin, ladies and gentlemen, from Winston Field, Long Island. A fleet of Army bombers carrying heavy explosives flying north in pursuit of enemy. Scouting planes act as guides. They keep speeding the enemy in sight. Just a moment, please. Ladies and gentlemen, we've run special wires to the artillery line in adjacent villages to give you direct reports in the zone of the advancing enemy. First, we take you to the battery of the 22nd Field Artillery, located in the Watchung Mountains. Range 32 meters.
32 meters.
Projection 39 degrees.
39 degrees.
Fire.
140 yards to the right, sir.
Shift range 31 meters.
31 meters.
Projection 37 degrees.
37 degrees.
Fire.
A hit, sir. We got the tripod of one of them. They've stopped. The others are trying to repair it.
Quick, get the range. Shift 30 meters.
30 meters.
Projection 27 degrees.
27 degrees.
Fire.
Can't see the shells. Can't see the shell, Lance, sir. They're letting off a smoke.
What is it?
A black smoke, sir. It's moving this way. Lying close to the ground. It's moving fast.
Put on gas masks. I'll get ready to fire. Shift 24 meters.
24 meters.
Projection 24 degrees.
24 degrees.
Fire.
It still can't see, sir. The smoke's coming nearer.
Get the range.
23 meters.
23 meters.
23 meters. Projection 22 degrees.
22 degrees.
Army bombing plane B-843 off Bayonne, New Jersey. Lieutenant Vaught, commanding 8 bombers, reporting to Commander Fairfax, Langham Field. This is Vaught, reporting to Commander Fairfax, Langham Field. Enemy tripod machines now in sight. Reinforced by 3 machines from Morristown Cylinder. 6 altogether. 1 machine partially crippled. Believed hit by a shell from an Army gun in the Watchung Mountains. Guns now appear silent. A heavy black fog's hanging close to the earth of extreme density. Nature unknown. No sign of a heat ray. The enemy now turns east, crossing the Passaic River into New Jersey marshes. Another straddles the Pulaski Skyway. Evident object is New York City. They're pushing down a high-tension power station. The machines are close together now, and we're ready to attack. Planes circling, ready to strike. 1,000 yards and we'll be over the first. 800 yards, 600, 400, 200. There they go. The giant arm raised. Green flash. Well, they're spraying us with flame. 2,000 feet. The engines are giving out. No chance to release the bombs. Only one thing left. Drop on them, plane and all. We're diving on the first one. Now the engine's gone. 8!
This is Bayonne, New Jersey, calling Langham Field. This is Bayonne, New Jersey, calling Langham Field. Come in, please. Come in, please.
This is Langham Field. Go ahead.
8 Army bombers in engagement with enemy tripod machines over Jersey Flats. Engines incapacitated by heat ray. All crashed. 1 enemy machine destroyed. Enemy now discharging heavy black smoke in direction of...
This is Newark, New Jersey. This is Newark, New Jersey. Warning, poisonous black smoke pouring in from Jersey marshes. Reaches South Street, gas mask useless. Urge population to move into open spaces. Automobiles use Route 7, 23, 24. Avoid congested areas. Smoke now spreading over Raymond Boulevard.
2X, 2L, calling CQ. 2X, 2L, calling CQ. 2X, 2L, calling 8X3R. Come in, please.
This is 8X3R, coming back at 2X21.
How's reception? How's reception, K? Please. Where are you, 8X3R? What's the matter? Where are you?
I'm speaking from the roof of the broadcast building, New York City. The sirens you hear are ringing to warn the people to evacuate the city as the Martians approach. Estimated in the last 2 hours, 3 million people have moved out along the roads to the north. Hutchinson River Parkway still kept open for motor traffic. Avoid bridges to Long Island hopelessly jammed. All communication with Jersey Shore closed 10 minutes ago. No more defenses. Our Army wiped out. Artillery, Air Force, everything wiped out. This may be the last broadcast. We'll stay here till the end. People are holding service below us in the cathedral. Now I look down the harbor, all manner of boats overloaded with fleeing population pulling out from the docks. Streets are all jammed. Noise and crowds like New Year's Eve in the city. Wait a minute. Enemy now inside above the Palisades. 5 great machines. First one crossing the river. I could see it from here, wading the Hudson like a man wading through a brook. The bulletins handed to me. Martian cylinders are falling all over the country. One outside Buffalo, one in Chicago, St. Louis. Seem to be timed and spaced. Now the first machine reaches the shore. He stands watching, looking over the city. His steel, cowlish head, even with the skyscrapers. He waits for the others. They rise like a line of new towers on the city's west side. Now they're lifting their metal hands. This is the end now. Smoke comes out, black smoke drifting over the city. People in the streets are seeing it now. They're running towards the East River, thousands of them just dropping like rats. The smoke is spreading faster. It's reached Times Square. People are trying to run away, but it's no use. They're falling like flies. Now the smoke's crossing 6th Avenue, 5th Avenue, 100 yards. It's 50 feet.
2X2L calling CQ. 2X2L calling CQ. 2X2L calling CQ. New York, isn't there anyone on the air? Isn't there anyone? 2X2L.
You're listening to McNeese Radio, Lake Charles Little Theater, and banners at McNeese State University presentation of Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the Air in an original dramatization of The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. The performance will continue after a brief intermission. This is McNeese Radio, KBYS 88.3 FM. The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, starring Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the Air.
As I set down these notes on paper, I'm obsessed by the thought that I may be the last living man on Earth. I've been hiding in this empty house near Ragley, a small island of daylight cut off by the black smoke from the rest of the world. All that happened before the arrival of these monstrous creatures in the world now seems to be part of another life, a life that has no continuity with the present furtive existence of this lonely derelict who pencils these words in the back of some astronomical notes bearing the signature of Richard Pearson. I look down at my blackened hands, my torn shoes, my tattered clothes, and I try to connect them with a professor who works at McNeese and who, on the night of October 20th, glimpsed through his telescope an orange splash of light on a distant planet. My wife, my colleagues, my students, my books, my observatory, my world, where are they? Did they ever exist? Am I Richard Pearson? What day is it? Do days exist without calendars? Does time pass when there are no human hands left to wind the clocks? In writing down my daily life, I tell myself I shall preserve human history between the dark covers of this little book that was meant to record the movements of the stars. But to write, I must live, and to live, I must eat. I find moldy bread in the kitchen and an orange not too spoiled to swallow. I keep watch at the window. From time to time, I catch sight of a Martian above the black smoke. The smoke still holds the house in its black coil, but at length there is a hissing sound, and suddenly I see a Martian mounted on his machine, spraying the air with a jet of steam, as if to dissipate the smoke. I watch in a corner as his huge metal legs nearly brush against the house. And exhausted by terror, I fall asleep. It's morning. The sun streams in the window. The black cloud of gas has lifted. The scorched meadows to the north look as though a black snowstorm has passed over them. I venture from the house. I make my way to a road. No traffic. Here and there a wrecked car, baggage overturned, a blackened skeleton. I push on south. For some reason, I feel safer trailing these monsters than running away from them. And I keep careful watch. I have seen the Martians feed. Should one of their machines appear over the top of the trees, I am ready to fling myself flat on the earth. I come to a pecan tree. October. Pecans are ripe. I fill my pockets. I must keep alive. For 2 days, I wander in a vague southerly direction through a desolate world. Finally, I notice a living creature, a small red squirrel in an oak tree. I stare at him and wonder. He stares back at me, and I believe in that moment the animal and I shared the same emotion, the joy of finding another human being. I push on south. I find dead cows in a brackish field beyond the charred ruins of a dairy. The silo remains standing guard over the wasteland like a lighthouse deserted by the sea. Astride the silo perches a weathercock. The arrow points south. Next day, I came to a community vaguely familiar in its contours, yet its structures strangely dwarfed and leveled off as if a giant had sliced off their roofs with a capricious sweep of his hand. I reached the outskirts. I found Moss Bluff, undemolished but humbled by some whim of the advancing Martians. Presently, with an odd feeling of being watched, I caught sight of something crouching in a doorway. I made a step towards it, and it rose up and became a man armed with a large knife.
Stop. Where did you come from?
I come from many places, a long time ago from McNeese.
Oh, McNeese, huh? South of Moss Bluff. In Lake Charles.
Yes.
McNeese. There's no food here, man. This is my country. All this end of town down to Sam Houston Park, there's only food for one. Which way you going?
I don't know. I guess I'm looking for people.
What was that? Did you hear something just then?
Only a bird. A live bird!
You get to know that birds have shadows these days. Say, we're in the open here. Let's crawl in this doorway and talk.
Have you seen any Martians?
They've gone over to Westlake. Night the sky is alive with their lights, just as if people were still living in it. But by daylight, you can't see them. 5 days ago, a couple of them carried something big across the flats from the airport. Believe they're learning how to fly.
Fly?
Yeah, fly.
Then it's all over with humanity. A stranger, there's still you and I. The two of us left.
They've got themselves in solid. They wreck the greatest country in the world. Those green stars, they're probably falling somewhere every night. They've only lost one machine. There isn't anything to do. We're done. We're licked.
Where were you? You're in a uniform.
What's left of it. I was in the militia, National Guard. That's good. Wasn't any war, any more than there's a war between men and ants.
And we're eatable ants. I found that out. What will they do to us?
Now, I've thought it all out. Right now, we're caught as we're wanted. Martian only has to go a few miles to get a crowd on the run, but they won't keep doing that. They'll begin catching us, systematic-like, keeping the best and storing us in cages and things. They haven't even begun on us yet.
Not begun?
Not begun. All that's happened so far is because we don't have sense enough to keep quiet, bothering them with guns and such stuff and losing our heads and rushing off in crowds. Now, instead of our rushing around blind, we've got to fix ourselves up according to the way things are now. Cities, nations, civilization, progress.
But if that's so, what is there to live for?
There won't be any more concerts for a million years or so, and no nice little dinners at restaurants either. If it's amusement you're after, guess that game's up.
And what is there left?
Life, man, that's what. I want to live. And so do you. We're not going to be exterminated, and I don't mean to be caught either, and tamed and fattened and bred like an ox.
What are you going to do?
I'm going on, right under their feet. I got a plan. We men as men are finished. We don't know enough. We got to learn plenty before we've got a chance. We got to live and keep free while we learn. I've thought it all out, see?
Tell me the rest.
Well, it isn't all of us that are made for wild beasts, and that's what it's got to be. That's why I watched you. All little office workers used to live in these houses. They'd be no good. They haven't any stuff in them. They just used to run off to work. I've seen hundreds of them clogging 210 in the morning for fear that they'd get canned if they didn't, running back at night afraid they won't be in time for dinner. Lives insured and a little invested in case of accidents. And on Sundays, worried about the hereafter. Martians will be a godsend for those guys. Nice roomy cages, good food, careful breeding. No worries. After a week or so chasing about the fields on empty stomachs, they'll come and be glad to be caught.
You've thought it all out, haven't you?
You bet I have. And that isn't all, man. These Martians will make pets of some of them. Train them to do tricks. Who knows? Get sentimental over the pet boy who grew up and had to be killed. And some men, maybe. They'll train them to hunt us.
No, that's impossible. No human being would put...
They will. There's men who'll do it gladly. If one of them ever comes after me, I'm going to
In the meantime, you and I, and others like us, where are we to live when the Martians own the Earth?
I've got it all figured out. We'll live underground, man. I've been thinking about the sewers. Under New York, miles and miles of them. Main ones are big enough for anybody. We got to get north to New York. There's cellars, vaults, underground storerooms, railway tunnels, subways. You begin to see, huh? And we'll get a bunch of strong men together, no weak ones. That rubbish is out.
As you meant me to go.
Well, I gave you a chance, didn't I?
We won't quarrel about that. Go on.
And we got to make safe places for us to stay in, see, and get all the books we can. Science books. That's where men like you come in, see? We'll raid the museums. We'll even spy on the Martians. May not be so much we have to learn before... Oh, God, just imagine this. 4 or 5 of their own fighting machines suddenly start off. Heat rays right and left, and not a Martian in them. Not a Martian in them, but men. Men who have learned the way how. May even be in our time. Gee, imagine having one of them lovely things with its heat ray. Wide and free. We'd turn it on Martians. We'd turn it on men. We'd bring everybody to their knees.
That's your plan?
You and me, a few more of us, we'd own the world.
I see.
Say, what's the matter? Where are you going?
Not to your world. Goodbye, stranger. After parting with the artilleryman, I came at last to Highway 171, Calcasieu River Bridge. I entered that silent concrete strip, anxious to know the fate of the great city on the other side of the interstate. Cautiously, I made my way up 171. I reached Broad Street, and there again was black powder and several bodies and an evil, ominous smell from the businesses as I walked west down Broad Street. I wandered up past Oak Grove and Graceland Cemetery. I stood alone at Enterprise and Broad, and I caught sight of a lean dog running near the Lake Charles Little Theater with a piece of dark brown meat in his jaws and a pack of starving mongrels at his heels. He made a wide circle around me as a
as though he feared I might prove a fresh competitor. I continued up Broad Street in the direction of that strange powder, past silent shop windows displaying their mute wares to empty sidewalks, past the First Methodist Church at Broad and Kirkman, silent, dark, past what used to be the Plantation House restaurant where I'd eaten for my senior prom, and near Broad and Kirby, I saw the KPLC tower broken in half and the top half sitting on the station. I reached Broad and Shell Beach, and I watched a flock of black birds circling in the sky near the Civic Center amphitheater. I hurried on, and suddenly I caught sight of the hood of a Martian machine standing somewhere near Millennium Park, gleaming in the late afternoon sun. An insane idea. I rushed recklessly across the Civic Center grounds and into the park. I climbed the small hill near the amphitheater, and from there I could see standing in a silent row along Borderlag Drive 19 of those great metal titans, their cowls empty, their steel arms hanging listlessly by their sides. I looked in vain for the monsters that inhabit those machines. Suddenly my eyes were attracted to the immense flock of black birds that hovered directly behind the amphitheater. They circled to the ground, and there, before my eyes, stark and silent, lay the Martians, with the hungry birds pecking and tearing brown shreds of flesh from their dead bodies. Later, when their bodies were examined in laboratories, it was found that they were killed by the putrefactive and diseased bacteria against which their systems were unprepared. Slain, after all men's defenses failed, by the humblest thing that God in his wisdom has put upon this earth. Before the cylinder fell, there was a general persuasion that through all the deep of space, no life existed beyond the petty surface of our minute sphere. Now we see further. Dim and wonderful is the vision I have conjured up in my mind of life spreading slowly from this little seed bed of the solar system throughout the inanimate vastness of sidereal space. But that is a remote dream. It may be that the destruction of the Martians is only a reprieve to them and not to us, as the future ordained, perhaps. Strange now, it seems, to sit in my peaceful office at McNeese writing down this last chapter of the record begun at a deserted farm in Ragley. Strange to see from my window the majestic facade of F.G. Bulber Auditorium through an April haze. Strange to watch children playing in the streets. Strange to see young people strolling on the McNeese Quad where the new spring grass heals the last black scars of a bruised earth. Strange to watch sightseers enter the museums where the dissembled parts of a Martian machine are kept on public view. And strange when I recall the first time I saw it. Oh, bright, clean-cut, hard, and silent. Under the dawn of that last great day.
Hey, this is Gary Shannon, ladies and gentlemen, out of character, to assure you that the War of the Worlds has no further significance than as the holiday offering it was intended to be. The Mercury Theater's own radio version of dressing up in a sheet and jumping out of a bush and saying boo. So starting now, we couldn't soap all your windows and steal all your garden gates by tomorrow night, so we did the next best thing. We annihilated the world before your very ears and utterly destroyed the CBS. You'll be relieved, I hope, to learn that we didn't mean it and that both institutions are still open for business. So goodbye to everybody, and remember, please, for the next day or so, the terrible lesson you learned tonight, that grinning, glowing, globular invader in your living room is an inhabitant of the pumpkin patch. And if your doorbell rings and there's nobody there, that was no Martian. It's Halloween.
You've been listening to a live presentation of The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, presented by McNeese Radio, KBYS, the Lake Charles Little Theater, and banners at McNeese State University. And look for more live presentations to come this holiday season as we present It's a Wonderful Life in mid-December. We thank you for joining us tonight. This is McNeese Radio, 88.3 KBYS, Lake Charles.